We've got the BC Hockey League Commissioner John Grisdale on the line with us. John, thanks so much for taking the time to chat here today.
Thank you very much, Brian. Glad to be part of the show.
So, as always, it seems like this time of the year we talk about what's happening because December 1st is a deadline that can be a little confusing to fans. So maybe let us know what the roster deadline is all about.
Well, each year Hockey Canada has two roster deadline cutdowns. For your listeners, each team is allowed under the Hockey Canada regulations to carry a maximum of 23 players. But under the regulation, they're given 45 playing cards. So in any one season, they can sign and or release up to 45 players. In the BC Hockey League, we only allow teams to have 35 cards. So on December 1st, teams are required to cut down to their current roster, that's the players they have on it, up to and including 23, plus unused cards to 25. So that's the December 1st one. Now what that means is if a team has 22 players on their current roster, on their team, and they have only used in signing and releasing, maybe 3 or 4 other cards, then they would have 3 cards remaining to sign players between December 2nd and January 10th. So it is confusing. It just means that teams have to cut down their rosters, allowing the other kids to find places to play.
So basically what it has to be is you can't have any more than 25 cards, but you can only have actually 23 actual bodies playing with your franchise.
Yeah, you can have those cards to make deals between December 2nd and January 10th.
Now, in an instance like Merritt here, we've got 21 players on the roster right now. Brett Collins, who was traded to Merritt but never actually reported. Does he count as a card?
Yes, he does. He has to be carded in a roster spot, has to, or December 2nd, he's free.
Oh, okay. So in the next, basically, day, Luke Pierce has to make a decision on what to do with Brett Collins, or I guess only having 21 players on the roster, they could keep him too.
Well, they'd have to put him on a playing card, which I'm not sure if they have yet.
Okay.
That means they would have 22, and that would then mean if they had 22 and he hadn't used all his cards by trading players or whatever, then he would then, the 35 of them.
Right.
So he would have 3 cards available to fill his 23-man roster spot. So he could release some players between December 2nd and January 10th, and use those cards to fill those spots to a maximum of 23.
Now, is it based on per team? Because if a team makes a 1-for-1 trade, does each player need to be recarded by their new team?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so a player, say, playing in Salmon Arm that came to Merritt and who was on the Salmon Arm roster, he would be released off the roster. So that was a card that Salmon Arm had used of the 35.
Right.
And a player going from Merritt to Salmon Arm, the same thing would happen.
Which is, I guess, why at this time of the year you actually see quite a few trades that end up being for future considerations where teams aren't giving up a roster player because they just need to get down to that number.
Yeah, or the team feels that they have a roster that they're happy with and they get something in return for next year. They're building for next year.
Right, obviously. Okay. Well, John, before I let you run, anything else that you wanted to add about the carding deadline for December the 1st and even January the 10th? Or I guess we could talk in a month.
Yeah, no, they're pretty similar. It's just the only difference in January, Brian, is that instead of having 25 cards available, all teams have to reduce to 23, a maximum 23. So the roster can be no bigger than 23 on January 10th.
And if you have any, is that a card deadline? Like, can you have any available cards to sign? Say, for example, an affiliate player or something like that after January 10th.
Yes, if a team goes through and has a card available on January 10th, they have 22 players with a card available. They can go through, and the actual signing deadline is February 10th. So if there are players unsigned in Canada anywhere, and they want to play junior A hockey, and they're junior age, they can be signed up to and including February 10th.
Okay, that I wanted to clarify really because sometimes you do see teams sign players after the January 10th deadline, and fans kind of wonder how that happens, but If he's been affiliated with another team, that's a different story than actually carding someone.
Or he could simply be released on January 10th.
Right.
So if it's a player that's unsigned for whatever reason, and so essentially he's released, so he goes through the January 10th deadline from wherever, and doesn't have a team to play with, he's eligible to sign with any team that has a playing card left up to February 10th.